Hi, I'm Professor Steve Keen, the inventor of Ravel, and I want to show you an issue about importing data into Ravel, which is going to be unfamiliar to a lot of people because most of us are used to just loading data in Excel. And that is a simple thing to do because Excel simply treats each individual cell as just an unrelated cell to any other cell when you're bringing in a CSV file which has no formulas inside it. And so if you had a cell or a spreadsheet, for example, that had, say, 1,000 rows and 500 columns, then you'd have 500,000 data cells. You might have 10 bytes of data, that'd be 5 million bytes. Bit of an overhead, the whole thing might fit in 6 or 7 megabytes. No problem, any computer can handle that. But when you do it with bringing stuff inside Ravel, we actually dimension the data. So we ask we tell you that this particular column, for example, is the country that's doing the borrowing, this is the sector doing the borrowing, this is who's doing the lending, etc., etc. And then what you get is what's known as the cursive dimensionality. If you had, for example, 10 data columns, and each of those $10 columns had 100 potential entries in it, then that is not 5 or 6 megabytes, it's 10 to the 100 times how many bytes take up each particular element. Now I recommend, for the sheer fun of it, go and use Elon Musk's AI program Grok and ask it to work out what 10 to the 100 is. You'll see that it's substantially more than the number of atoms in the universe. Obviously, if you can't fit your model inside the universe, you're not going to fit it inside your computer either. So you have to do a bit of trimming. And I'll show 2 ways to go about that. So this is bringing in data import into Ravel. I'll now choose which one do I go for? I'll go with one that I've trimmed first of all, because what I've done with this file, and that's the one you can see down here, is I've cut out the columns that aren't important using Excel just basically to get rid of them. If I choose load on that, then Ravel does a bit of intelligent work itself first of all and says, well, I think this particular row, the top one, is with a header, and I'm going to use the headers for the names of the dimensions, and then all these entries down here I think are values for the axis, so this is the country, the sector, lending sector, valuation method, etc., etc. And then it also guesses that the information you can see down here, and I've got to go a long way to find actual data in this file. The very first numbers turning up for the second quarter in 1940, Ratri, Argentina, but it guesses that all that stuff is data. And then this is all stored horizontally. So if I go sideways like this, you can see data for the second quarter, 1940, third, fourth, etc., etc., right out to 2023. So I'm going to name this horizontal dimension date. It's a time dimension, and I'm going to give it the dimension of the year, a dash, the letter Q, and then the quarter number. And click import, and it's in. And I can then attach it to a Ravel. And when you have more than 7 dimensions, and there are 6 vertical dimensions and 1 horizontal dimension here. So there's 6 in total. We show it in a beige way because we found it rather overwhelming to see the names overlapping with each other. That might not be necessary anymore. We might change that later, but I'll just quickly dive inside here and refine it so we can see the actual data properly. So let's say I only want data that's adjusted for breaks, and I'll take in everything else in the system. So I'm dragging these selector dots back into the center so that I'm outputting, as you can see, a 3-dimensional, that's a 4-dimensional, 5, and I can use the arrow keys, by the way. If I hold the arrow key down on the borrowing sector and press the down arrow, it goes back into the center, and the same thing for the country. So I'll do that, and now I'll attach another Ravel to that, and pardon me, I clicked one too many there, I'll just delete that. What we do when we first load Ravel, because it is such an unusual program, we show it in the full expanded mode where you can edit and modify the columns and so on. I'm going to turn that back to the compressed version and then show this one in full scale in editor mode. And I've got 7 dimensions. I made a mistake there, pardon me. Let's just move this sideways, open this one up again. What did I do? Okay, I'll make the adjustment, so I'll choose adjusted for breaks. So drag that to there, drag the dot, shut that down, get the program to recalculate, and then you see the 6 dimensions of the data, and at that stage it's obviously what's going on. If you want to see, if this is currently date by unit type, I'd rather see date by country, so I just drag the country axis down here, and then what we've inputted out this side is data on date by country for all those various divisions. If I wanted to see just percentage of GDP, then I'd drag it up to here to percentage of GDP, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the fast way. Clean it up in Excel and then load it into Ravel. But you can also clean it up in Ravel as well, so I'll show that too. Choose the file which has all the dimensions. I haven't trimmed it initially in Excel. This is the raw file you'll get from the Bank of International Settlements. I'll make this full screen so I can show all this stuff here. Load the various columns. Ravel then does its intelligent guessing, and now what I can say is, well, this is the letter Q, which stands for quarterly. I don't need both, so I'm going to ignore that. And I'm going to ignore this and keep on going. But I'll show the wrong way in a moment. This is the right way to go about it. So you go through doing a bit of telling Ravel what to take notice of and what not to take notice of. We'll ultimately add further intelligence to Ravel so that it does this sort of checking for itself, but that hasn't yet been done. So this is a bit of manual work by you when you first start bringing data inside. And then, let's say I'm ignoring that one. And if I actually select a range using the names, then I can just simply click on one of them, the ignore, and it will say ignore the lot. So let's now take a look at what I'm bringing in. I'm bringing in borrower's country, borrowing sector, lending sector, valuation, unit type, adjustment, and I'm bringing in the date. And I've got to specify that, the date, so it's date, and it's time dimension, and it's got the format of the year, a dash, letter Q, and the quarter number, and that'll import nice and easily. And that's the object there, and I could do the same thing I've done over here. Now, what happens if I instead, and I'll just create a new file, save that file, what happens if I simply try to bring the whole lot in and don't do the checking that I did just a moment ago? So same story, up comes the form, choose the untrimmed file, this one here, which is the raw data, load it. It does the same intelligent checking, so I know it's chosen the horizontal dimension as data, and that's all there. Now click on import and see what happens. Something went wrong. I failed to match pattern. Now my mistake there. What have I? Let's see. Okay, just take a bit of look there. I'm a bit too cocky there. Let's say data here. So that's date by time. Let's try again and see what the error message is. I know what's going on. Just ignore this particular number. It's chosen that to be data dimension when it's not. It doesn't have the right format. It's just the number 9. That's what caused the problem. I click on import, and here I get the message I wanted to show the problem that one of my users currently had. Hypercube dimensionality exceeds maximum size. And that's the whole recursive dimensionality. With 15 dimensions times the number of potential entries per dimension, you get 15 to the power of the numbers, and you're talking probably, maybe not more atoms than there are in the universe, but probably almost certainly more stars than there are in the universe. That's a bit bigger than your computer memory. So you have to go through a bit of work beforehand to trim the information down before you bring it into Ravel. The easiest thing to do is to, well, I think probably the easiest thing to do is actually trim it in Excel. Use Excel as a cutting tool, and then you've got this information here, which is much more compact than here, but has exactly the same actual data, and then import that, or you use Ravel's capacity to say ignore this column, and etc., etc., and you'll have your data in, and you can do your analysis.